Wishing to speak on for Mr. Toth for what purpose?
Will the gentleman yield for questions?
The gentleman's time has expired. There was first extension of time. A second one would require unanimous consent.
Seek an extension of time.
Mr. Toth, I do hear an objection. Time is not extended. Anyone wish to speak on, for, or against Senate Bill 412? Ms. Zwiener in opposition.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, members. I find this a very complicated piece of legislation to stand up here and speak against. And that's because if we followed the letter of the law every single day in this state, Representative Patterson's bill would do no harm. Unfortunately, there is a very active effort in the state of Texas right now to drum up fear against books and to pursue people for providing books that do not meet any legal standard of obscenity, either obscenity for adults or for minors, as though they were criminals. Members, a deputy constable in Hood County named Scott London followed 3 librarians around the school for months in Granbury ISD, looked at what books were on the shelves, looked at whether or not they were provided to students, and spent months functionally harassing these teachers, even though not a single thing about those books meets the constitutional standards for obscenity for minors. Not a thing. But that being unconstitutional, that being against the law, did not stop him from making those librarians' lives hell. It was wrong. It was state-sanctioned harassment. And that harassment culminated in him filing a criminal complaint.
Mr. Toth, for what purpose?
Mr. Speaker, will the gentleman yield for
Does
questions?
the gentleman yield for questions?
Not at this time.
Not at this time, Mr. Toth.
A criminal complaint against these librarians who were just trying to do their job and educate students and turn them into avid, voracious readers, just like every single one of us should want our children to be. Now, luckily, the DA in Hood County did the right thing. He took those charging documents and he tossed them away because he was wrong. Because the deputy constable was wrong and he was operating outside of his authority. But this legislation is designed to make those librarians and educators more afraid. And it's designed to further the lie that our librarians and teachers are trying to harm our students. Members, think back to your school librarians. I remember mine. Did they ever try to cause you harm, or did they just encourage you to learn and read and grow? We all know what sort of people are working in our schools. Let's not put a target on their backs, which is what the goal of this legislation is. And members, you heard the author of the bill up here. He did not provide a straight answer on whether this legislation should be used to target Nobel Prize-winning works of literature being offered to our students in our schools. Remember, that's not just a problem because some of us enjoy those books. It's also a problem for our students to be prepared for the AP test and to succeed in institutions of higher education. This legislation is about bringing fear down on educators. And members, you've all heard from educators in your districts about their various concerns and why people are leaving the profession. There's many reasons, but one of them is that we set them up to be harassed. One of the reasons they are leaving the profession is because we keep bringing culture wars to our schools and making it harder for them to do their jobs, which is just to educate kids. So members, I urge you to vote no on this bill. Vote to protect our libraries and educators from rogue law enforcement and
Mr.
prosecutors who want them to be harassed
Mr.
and want
Toth,
them to
for
be
what
afraid.
purpose?
Generally to yield.
Does the gentlelady yield for questions?
I yield.
She yields for questions.
Thank you. Ms. Weiner, you seem pretty committed, pretty concerned about librarians. Do kids matter?
Kids absolutely matter, and kids are substantially
I didn't
better
hear you mention one thing about kids
off.
while you, in your what you
Please
just
don't
shared.
interrupt me, sir. Kids are substantially better off if they have the access to a wide-ranging world of books. I mean, one of the things that concerns me so much about books like The Bluest Eye being targeted is that's a book that supports students who are learning to navigate racism in their own lives.
Ms. Weiner,
who
do you
are
believe-
learning to
do you-
understand what racism looks like if they don't experience it themselves, and learning what sexual violence within a family can look like. Many of the books that get targeted again and again are books that depict sexual assault. And there is nothing I want more than for our young people to be exposed to what sexual assault can look like so they
Ms.
can
Weiner,
avoid
so
it,
you're-
so they can avoid it, so they can
Ms.
support
Weiner, you're
their...
supposed to be answering questions. You're
I
not
am
here. You're not here to filibuster.
Would you like the front mic, Representative Toth? Because you're not letting me
I'd
finish
like
answering you.
I heard your answer.
I'm not done answering. Well, I was almost hoping we might have ruined the microphone and maybe that would kill the bill. So what I am saying is our kids need books where they learn about sexual assault without experiencing it in their real lives. I hear about protecting kids all the time. Being a minor did not protect me from being sexually assaulted when I was 17. And having access to material that shows that people get up the next day and continue with their lives is important for survivors. Having material
Weiner,
that shows
is the
the
amount of
harm
sexual
that
assault
I
in our-
am not done, Representative Toth. Having material that shows our students that what sexual assault looks like so they don't further it, so they develop empathy to respect the choices of others, so they support their friends who experience sexual assault, and so that they learn warning signs for how to avoid abusers. Those are important, and that helps our kids every single day.
Ms. Weiner, you don't believe that pornography is harmful to young children?
What I am speaking about is not pornography. There is no pornography in our public school libraries or in our municipal libraries.
Have you read Fun Home?
I have not read Fun Home,
Okay,
but
Fun Home
I have read a sequel book by the author,
Can I tell you
and
about
it did
Fun Home?
not contain any pornography.
Can I tell you about Fun Home?
You may.
Fun Home was in Conroe Independent School District, my district. And it was protected by the prior board. And it's a picture of two girls giving each other oral sex. Is that pornographic for two girls to give each other oral sex? Is that appropriate for little kids to see?
We evaluate material for
Is that
pornography
appropriate?
standards.
Is it
You asked me
appropriate? Is
two
that
questions.
pornographic
I'm
to
answering
you?
the first one. What is pornographic has to fall under 3 tests. Nobody is going to look at paintings by Manet like Olympia that show a nude woman
this isn't a painting.
and say that's pornography, even if the exact same image in a Playboy magazine might be. Context matters. And so we have to look at that 3-pronged test. Whether or not it belongs in an individual school library is a determination I won't say without the book in front of me, and it's going to depend on the individual schools. This book is not about how books are selected to be in our school libraries. It is about whether or not we should subject people to jail time for handing people books, and whether or not we harass librarians and teachers using law enforcement out of providing books
How
that are
about
completely
Lillian Duncan?
appropriate.
Have you read Lillian Duncan?
I have not read Lillian Duncan.
Okay, Lillian Duncan, to your point earlier, you'd stated on the bluest, what was the other one you?
The Bluest Eye by Toni Morrison.
Right, and how very little sexually explicit material is in like a couple pages, I think you said. Lillian Duncan, the problem with it is that in the back of the book, there's a how-to guide from the Trevor Project. Are you familiar? I'm sure you're familiar with the Trevor Project, aren't you?
I am familiar with the Trevor Project and grateful for all the work they do to try and prevent suicide among the LGBTQ
So
community.
you think it's appropriate for adults to be able to counsel children that are transitioning, that should be talking to their parents about it, but instead it takes you to a website
Representative
where,
Tucker, yeah.
let me finish my question, where it takes you to a website where you're instructed to put your cursor over a kill switch so that if your mom or dad walks up, it will take you to the prior website that you were at. You think that's appropriate to hide from parents?
Representative Toth, this book is about obscenity, and I don't think your question has anything to do with obscenity.
It's clearly about
The
obscenity.
gentlelady's time has expired.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Little in support of the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, I'm going to try to bring the temperature down a little bit and talk about just the legal aspects of this bill, which I think are very important for you to consider. With great respect and consideration for my esteemed colleague, Representative Zwiener, this is not a complex bill. It is a very simple bill. It's 2 pages long. One of the sections dealing with the revocation of affirmative defenses deals with sexual performance by a child. As a lawyer, it is very difficult for me to understand how a legislature in the past implemented or wrote into law affirmative defenses to sexual performance by a child that included bona fide educational, psychiatric, or other governmental purposes besides judicial and law enforcement. It simply makes no sense. It never should have been there. I understand that a lot of our discussion so far has revolved around harmful content and what constitutes harmful content under Texas law. Respectfully, that is not the purpose of the bill. And one thing I want you to consider is, should there ever be an educational, a scientific, or psychiatric or psychological reason to display harmful content for a child? And I would contend that the answer to that is no. There should never be a reason for that. It is called harmful content for a reason, because it is harmful. Representative Zwiener expressed concerns that this is going to put teachers or librarians in fear. And ladies and gentlemen, I would submit to you humbly, teachers and librarians that intentionally, knowingly, or recklessly expose children to harmful content should be in fear in the state of Texas. I know there is extreme concern also from our colleagues on the other side of the aisle that Nobel Prize winning literature should be offered to children. And I think, of course, in most situations it should. However, there are situations where unbelievably accomplished authors such as Toni Morrison will have written pieces of literature, and that's what they are, pieces of literature, that are not appropriate for a school-aged child. And I think we as reasonable people should agree that certain works of literature are too mature for children to be subjected to in schools. As accomplished as those authors are, and as important as those works of literature are, they shouldn't be exposed to children in schools. Representative Zwiener in our chamber here expressed concern that we need to, quote, I had to write these words down because I was shocked that they came out of her mouth, show children what sexual assault looks like. That is not the purpose of a school. It is not the purpose of a school in the state of Texas. It should not be the purpose of a school anywhere in the United States of America. We have written many bills this legislative session about sexual assault. I have co-authored and joint authored many of them by many of you in here. There are important changes that have been made to the law by Representative Johnson, Representative Howard, many of my colleagues on the other side of the aisle. And there is an appropriate time and place to make changes to the law about sexual assault. educating people through pictures of sexual assault in a school is a bridge too far, and I hope my colleagues on both sides of the aisle will agree. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Ms. Bowers in opposition to the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. Today I rise not just as a legislator, but as a lifelong advocate to education, equity, and truth. At the heart of every school and every community, there stands a librarian, not just as a keeper of books, but a cultivator of curiosity. The job of a librarian is to broaden the minds of our children, to introduce them to worlds beyond their own, to affirm their identities, challenge their assumptions, and ignite their imaginations. When we threaten that role, when we criminalize librarians for simply doing their job, we are not protecting children. We are limiting them. We are silencing diverse voices. We are censoring history, and we are sending a chilling message to the very people we trust to educate and empower the next generation. So let me be clear. Protecting children does not mean shielding them from reality. It means giving them the tools to understand it, to navigate it, and to grow into compassionate, informed, and engaged citizens. Librarians deserve our respect, they deserve protection, and our children deserve access to the full truth of our shared humanity, not a filtered version that excludes, erases, or shames. Thank you.
Please excuse Mr. Lambert because of important business on motion of Mr. Ashby. Is there objection? Chair is none, so ordered. Mr. Verdell in support.
Members, thank you for your time. I'll be quick. This isn't about Republican or Democrat party politics. This is about doing what's right for the children. Every single one of us have a duty to stand up and protect the children of the state of Texas. I just had somebody send me the images of what's in that book. It is the most vile, disgusting stuff you will see, and no kid should ever be subject to that, and no person here should vote nay on that. I would appreciate your support on this bill. Thank you.
Mr. Morgan in support of the bill.
Thank you. Sorry, members, I'll be quick as well. I want you to ask yourself before you vote, are the morals in this country going up or down? If you think they're going down, then there are changes we need to make to help our children. You can't unsee the images that are in these books. You can't unread these words. And so for that reason, I ask you to please vote for the bill. Thank you.
Ms. Pearson in support.
Members, this is not about librarians, it is about children. And as a mother, I will ask you all to go to this book on page 8485, The Bluest Eye by Tom Morrison, the book in question of this entire debate. And I would like for you to read the pages 84 and 85 and ask yourselves if this is a book that you would like your own children to be read to and provided to without your knowledge. Please vote for this bill.
Mr. Patterson to close.
Mr. Speaker.
Ms. Turner, for what purpose?
Please, gentlemen, yield for some questions.
Gentleman yield for questions.
Be happy to.
Gentleman yields for questions.
Thank you, Representative Patterson. Your bill removes several purposes, including educational. Is that right?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. Are you aware that concerns have been raised by educators in the state that the bill could have sweeping consequences, perhaps unintended consequences that could impact classroom instruction in our state?
No,
You're not aware of those concerns?
I don't believe that there are concerns about that.
Okay. Well, let me ask you. We have some background music, and looking at a document that Association of Texas Professional Educators put together that we had in State Affairs when we heard your House bill. There's concern that literature such as The Scarlet Letter by Nathaniel Hawthorne, Romeo and Juliet by Shakespeare, and I could think of several other Shakespearean plays, Hamlet, Taming of the Shrew, and others, that could be viewed through the lens of this legislation as being obscene or otherwise harmful to children because of sexual imagery, mature themes, etc. What would you say to those concerns?
I would say that there is no concern that any adult could have if they don't plan to show harmful materials to a minor. My mom taught school for 38 years, Representative Turner, 38 years she spent in the classroom. My wife's a public school teacher now and was before she took a 13-year break to raise our children. I don't believe that the 99% want this material in their schools. I understand the big teachers unions and who they're run by and what their position is. I do not believe that teachers want this material in schools.
Okay. So you're saying you don't want, and 99% of people do not want the Scarlet Letter taught in schools?
No, I'm talking about materials that would be defined under this bill as a harmful material.
Well, so that's the essence of my question, Representative Patterson, is as defined in the bill, it is broad and it's expansive.
I don't believe so.
And I understand the types of materials that you're targeting. You've communicated that very clearly. So my question is not about that, though. My question is about other works, such as The Scarlet Letter, Romeo and Juliet, Brave New World by Aldous Huxley, and I would add, it's not just literature, it's art. So Michelangelo's David, that's nudity. So
this doesn't say that it has to contain nudity. Nowhere in this does containing nudity in and of itself. Again, we mentioned earlier, anatomy and physiology, biology, other science would not meet the standard here. That's not what we're talking about.
Well, and I appreciate that, but can you see how this is subjective?
No.
That it is you don't see that it's subjective?
I don't see that it's subjective because there's existing Supreme Court precedent, and those are the folks that are going to be arguing over this, is folks that would have to understand what is appropriate to show a child. And I would submit to you that if anyone questions whether it's appropriate to give to a child or to display to a child, that maybe they shouldn't do it. Maybe they should take a second look and say, maybe I won't give this to a child. Sure.
So what if a teacher, looks at this law, or assuming it becomes law, and says, I think this is really about the kind of books Representative Patterson was talking about, but this is pretty broad. I don't really know if I'm comfortable showing my art history in art history, showing my students a photograph of David. Could a reasonable person say that would be a concern because of the broadness of this legislation, that it could have a chilling effect, even if it's not your intent, but a chilling effect to say, I don't know if I should teach David. I don't know if I should teach The Scarlet Letter. I don't know if I should teach Hamlet.
I think that teachers every single day as a part of their job make decisions on what to present to their students and not based on a wide array of criteria, including what is age appropriate to show their audience.
Well, unquestionably, they do, and I think by and large they do a very good job of that. But what they do is very much informed by the laws that we pass in this legislature. And if we say they can't do something, they can't do it. And
that's right. Or they shouldn't.
And correct. If whether I support a law or don't, if it's the law, people should follow it. But that gets to the point of my concern. And my question is, this legislation could be interpreted to say literature that depicts sexual themes, adult themes, nudity, as in the case of David, to say, you know what, we're just not, we don't think that's allowed to be in the classroom anymore, so we're not going to teach that. I mean, is that a fair concern?
I think any teacher that has something of, quote, adult themes should absolutely think twice before showing it to minors, 100%.
Well, you would agree the Scarlet Letter is very much adult themed.
You know, I'm 42. It's been a while, so I'll have to check that one out.
It's been a while for me too, but I read that in my American literature class, sophomore year of high school, so I was 15 or 16 years old. You know, and it is very much adult themed. It's about it's about a woman who has an affair and is branded literally with the scarlet letter A for her sin, and so that is unquestionably, you would agree that's an adult theme, right?
I mean, I think that we could go book by book and go through an entire library. I think it's very clear what this bill says and what the existing Supreme Court precedent is and what this entire chapter, let's come back to the bill because we want to get lost on library books.
I'm trying to ask about the bill.
I know 20 Democrats voted for this bill yesterday because they stood up for children yesterday, and I'm proud of those votes. And what I will tell you is that it's not about individual books like what you're going to want to make it to be about. This is about materials that would be otherwise illegal to show to a child except that they are within a school. Why would 4 walls of a government-funded school prevent someone from going to jail for showing something to a child that if you were out here on the lawn of the Capitol, you would be arrested and taken to jail for showing a child that same material? That's what this bill does. It mirrors up what everyone else in society has to live under. If you're an adult and you can't show a child this material, you shouldn't be shielded from the law if you're a doctor or a teacher or a librarian, period. This is not, we're bogging down into these individual books, and that's
and
not
Representative,
what this is.
I hear what you're saying, but the bill is not that specific. I mean, you're removing bona fide educational purpose, and
Right.
that is the root of my questions here.
Yes, because there's no bona fide retail purpose and there's no bona fide hot air balloon purpose. There's no purpose.
I'm not following that.
There's
Sorry.
no purpose in society where it's okay under the law except currently schools, medicine, and science. Why? Why on earth would it be illegal for you in your professional job to show something to a child? It would be illegal for you to show that to a child, but if you're a teacher, you're shielded from the law. For the life of me, I can't understand that. Okay. And let's keep in mind that this bill not only deals with harmful materials, we're talking about sexual performances of a child. I know nobody at the back mic wants to talk about that, but this also deals with the sexual performance of a child. How come if I'm an educator, I am shielded from the law from showing people a sexual performance of a child? That blows my mind. How has that been on the books for 50 years?
But Representative, I understand that's what you want to talk about. That is not my question. My question is about established famous works of literature and art that I think are going to be swept up in this bill, and I don't think you've adequately addressed the concerns about that. Let me just ask you this. Is it your intent with this legislation that works such as the Scarlet Letter, Hamlet, Romeo and Juliet, David cannot be taught in our schools? Is that your intent?
If it is a harmful material, it has no place in our schools.
Okay, I'll take that as a yes. Finally, last question. I know other people have questions. Who's the decider here? Who's going to decide if someone's breaking this law?
Typically, when someone breaks the law, they're either a police officer or law enforcement officer sees them break the law, or they're reported to law enforcement for breaking the law. They could be arrested or they could be talked to by law enforcement, and then that's handled in the courts.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Jones, for what purpose?
Will the gentleman yield?
Does the gentleman yield for questions?
I will.
Gentleman yields for questions.
So I've been listening to this dialogue, and as a person who is a survivor of brutal rapes as a kid, me, that caused me to attempt suicide and be lonely and not know who I could talk to it about. And even, I just want to say this, when I outcried as an adult, there were people in my family who didn't believe me because it was their father or something. Right,
I'm
but it
so
happened.
sorry.
And I'm not asking.
that happened.
I'm not asking for your sympathy, but I do want to say this. Can you explain how this bill helps a child who is being abused at home and can't talk to their parents because their parent maybe supports the abuser? And do you want to answer that for me?
Yeah, let me be very clear about this bill, because I think we need to stay on the bill. This bill prevents the abuse of a child. The only exemptions for the affirmative defense left in this bill are after the abuse occurs and law enforcement and judicial officers are forced to talk to the child about the abuse. This bill stops abuse.
But what I'm saying is, I'm being abused at home. I have people who don't believe me. I want to kill myself. I've tried to kill myself, but I haven't been successful. And I don't see light at the end of the tunnel. And I'm in the library. That is a safe place for me. And I find a book that shows that you can get through this, and that tells me this is how you can get through this. I just want for you to know, I believe you're denying those children that access because they don't have a safe space at home or safe people, safe grown-ups to tell them about it.
Well, let me say that I'm sorry and my heart aches for every single child that goes through that. But there are a number of resources and a number of books that deal with that and that can help children without further harming them and other children and opening them up to harmful, explicit materials that would otherwise be banned under the law. Because keep in mind, I don't see bookstores having an affirmative defense to prosecution under the current penal code. I'm not removing an affirmative defense to prosecution for bookstores in this bill. I'm removing an affirmative defense to prosecution for educators who want to show harmful materials to children, or those in the scientific community, or those in the medical community, or those that want to utilize the sexual performance of a child to a child. That's what we're removing here.
And let me say this. There are plenty of grown-ups who groom kids.
Yes.
Right? They teach kids that this is okay. Kid might not feel quite right about it.
And if you want to stop that, you'll help me pass this bill today.
And they have, no, I actually respectfully disagree with your assessment of that. Because I have a grown-up who I'm supposed to be able to trust telling me that these things are okay. The books can say, no, these are not okay.
They should say that that's not okay.
And when they do those types of things to you, that's not okay. So I think that children are being denied that. I also, I know that Rep. Bowers talked about librarians. What if there's a librarian who literally does not want to break this law?
Yes.
And the librarian reads the definition of it, and the librarian censors, goes through all the books in the library, and in good faith believes a book does not violate the law, but someone complains about that book, and now the librarian is facing criminal penalties when there was never an intention to violate the law. So in other words, we're expecting librarians to be the moral police. Is there an affirmative defense to that in this bill?
I think that there's a million different hypotheticals that we could go through today, and there's one answer. No adult has any reason to show a child harmful materials or the sexual performance of a child for any reason except if they're investigating a crime against that child, period.
And I'll end with this. My mother worked in the Texas Southern Library when I was a kid. It was her work-study job. And other than what was going on in our house, I could learn about other things in the library. I could learn about other things in the library. And all I'm saying to you is I believe this bill is well-intentioned. I understand that.
Thank you.
But I also believe that this bill is going to catch people up in something that they did not intend to break. And I'm not going to quibble about whether great works of art or paintings, because to me, I'm not looking at that. I'm looking at a kid like me who didn't have a lot of options, who didn't know where I could go to figure out anything. And even when I was an adult and I outcried, there were people who said they didn't believe what actually happened to me. And believe me, it took me a lot of counseling with professionals to be where I am today. I believe your bill is going to put a lot of kids in a position where they can't figure out how to get out, and they may be stuck because you believe that books that could help us is somehow a danger to us, when quite frankly, it's the escape for us. Thank you.
Thank you. And I respect your opinion, and I respect this debate. And I thank you for bringing your questions forward.
Ms. Garcia, for
Mr.
what
Speaker,
purpose?
does the gentleman yield for questions?
Does the gentleman yield for questions?
Absolutely.
The
Thank
gentleman
you.
yields for questions.
Representative Patterson, is it your position that this bill will outlaw the graphic sexual imagery of books in schools?
I think, based on the Supreme Court precedent, that it would have to meet all three of the criteria, including the prurient interest of a minor in sex, nudity, and excretion. It's got to be patently offensive to the prevailing standards in the adult community as a whole, and it's got to be without redeeming social value for minors.
And would this include erotic poetry by chance?
I hope so, but I don't know. I mean, I'm sure that they'll look at examples and make a decision.
Okay, so would another example possibly of a book that we don't need in school be genital injury or amputation?
The scientific classes that we take will not fall. I understand where you're coming from. Again, for like the 15th time, anatomy and physiology, biology, and science classes, that's not what we're talking about here. There is no concern. I'm sure the teachers' unions want to rile everybody up and make this a concern for teachers. That is not what is covered under this bill. We're talking about harmful materials. We're talking about things that are without redeeming social value to a minor, or something that is patently offensive to the prevailing standards, not in the minor community, but in the adult community. This is much more clear than I think what you're stating it is.
Well, to speak specifically about the genital amputation, I wasn't speaking of scientifically. I was thinking more of a wife, Lorena Bobbiting her husband, a book like that. Would that be okay in school?
Look, there's a million different examples that we could see without looking at anything. I'm not going to answer hypotheticals about these things.
What about incest? Would incestual materials in a book be presented in school? Would that be okay?
Is that in schools right now? Is that what, are teachers out there concerned? I mean, if we have a lot of teachers concerned, let me phrase this in a way that's not a question since I'm at the front mic. If we have a lot of teachers concerned and cowering down under their desks because they're afraid they're going to have to put their incest materials away if we pass this bill, then we're in more of a world of hurt than I thought we were walking onto this floor today.
Yes, sir. And what about gang rape?
You know, there was a book challenged in Plano ISD that had a group of demons gang raping a woman.
Yes, sir.
I don't believe that that's appropriate in a public school.
Thank you, sir. What about cannibalism?
I mean, we can go through a million different, why don't you just read them all off and then I'll answer them as one answer.
Yes, sir. Mothers eating their children? Sexual manipulation and death? War and captivity of virgins? Menstrual and bodily fluids? All of these are all stories in the Bible, sir. And so I'm just curious if all of those stories also fall under the rules.
You know, I'm going to try to think how to answer this respectfully.
And respectfully, I have read the Bible multiple times, as you heard testimony from Representative Jones. I too am a childhood victim of sexual abuse. Matter of fact, I was 7 years old when I thought I was pregnant for the first time. So that can tell you a little bit about that. But what I'm asking is...
The gentleman's time has expired.
Thank you, sir.
The question occurs on final passage. This is a record vote. Give everyone time to vote from their desks. The clerk will ring the bell. Show Representative Hunter voting aye. Show Louderback voting aye. Have all members voted? Ms. Jones voting no. Ms. Bowers voting no. Have all members voted? There being 92 ayes and 39 nays, Senate Bill 412 is finally passed. Mr. Hunter for an announcement.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, just a reminder, Calendars Committee will be meeting now in 3W9.